3 days before Christmas, my mother called. I was in the PX parking lot on base, sitting in a government sedan with the engine running and the heater off. Frost gathered on the inside of the windshield, slow and steady. I didn't bother wiping it. I just sat there, boots flat on the floor, one gloved hand resting on the gear shift, the other holding the phone. "Claire," she said. Then a pause. "Samantha doesn't want the drama." 7 words. That was all. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask if I'd gotten leave or if the roads were clear. She didn't ask if I'd be driving in or flying. She didn't ask what time I'd be arriving or how long I'd be staying. She just said it. Samantha doesn't want the drama. I stared straight ahead. The windshield had fogged completely. I could just make out the chain-link fence beyond the lot. I said, "Okay." She hesitated. "I hope you understand." "I do." I hung up. Not because I was done talking, but because I knew she was. I sat in the car for another 10 minutes. The heater remained off. The cold worked its way through the seams of my coat, into my shoulders, across my chest. My breath misted the window, soft and shallow. I drove back to the barracks without turning on the radio. I packed a bag, changed into civilian clothes, and booked a 2-day pass through the online portal. No reason provided, no questions asked. The closest city was Chicago. I found a small hotel off South Michigan Avenue. Not the kind with a view, but clean, quiet, and forgettable. The front desk clerk didn't look up when I checked in. She handed me the key card, said breakfast ended at 9, and pointed toward the elevator with a mechanical sort of politeness. The room smelled like fresh detergent and old air. Beige walls, a desk with a faux leather blotter, a window that looked out over an alleyway lined with dumpsters. I dropped my bag by the closet and sat on the edge of the bed. I hadn't packed much. A change of clothes. 2 uniforms, dress and duty, folded tight into the bottom of the duffel out of habit. I wouldn't need either of them. That night, I walked down to the lake. The wind was sharp, dry, aggressive. It whipped across the water and through the gaps in the buildings like it had some place to be. I stood near the railing and watched the frozen waves pile against each other under the surface. No one else was out there. The city was quiet in that particular way cities get just before the holidays, half asleep, half tense. Lights flickered in windows above, but the street-level world had emptied. No carolers, no shoppers, just delivery trucks parked illegally and a pair of kids smoking behind a shuttered cafe. I walked without direction until I passed a diner with condensation on the windows and a neon sign that buzzed faintly against the dark. 24 hours, it said in red script. I went inside. The place was warm, lit by overhead fluorescents and strands of colored bulbs taped along the ceiling. Tinsel hung between booths like someone had meant to do more, but ran out of energy halfway through. The waitress wore a Santa hat and orthopedic shoes. She brought me coffee before I'd ordered and refilled it twice before saying a word. "Cold out there," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "You passing through?" "No." She nodded like that made sense. I ordered pancakes. When they came, I cut them into pieces but didn't eat. To my left, a couple sat across from each other in the corner booth. He wore a deep red scarf wrapped twice around his neck, hands large and careful as he buttered toast. She had white curls and soft eyes, a brooch shaped like a snowflake pinned just below her collarbone. They looked like they belonged to the place, not to the city or even the holiday, but to the kind of life that doesn't measure time in disappointment. I glanced at them once, then again. She caught my eye. "You're alone?" she asked. Not kindly, just plainly. I nodded. She turned to her husband. He didn't speak. He just shifted his plate slightly toward the edge of the table. A small movement, quiet but unmistakable. She looked back at me. "Would you like to join us?" I didn't answer right away, not because I was surprised, because I had learned to measure kindness the way I measured risk, slowly, from the edges in. Then I stood, picked up my plate, and walked to their table. They moved without ceremony. He pulled the condiments toward the wall. She lifted her purse from the seat beside her. I sat down across from them. "I'm Linda," she said. "This is Joe." "Claire?" She smiled. "Nice to meet you, Claire." Joe nodded. "Merry Christmas." He didn't say it like a habit. He said it like a statement of fact. Linda waved down the waitress and asked for another mug. "She'll have some coffee," she said, "and bring some of that berry jam. It goes better with pancakes." The waitress brought the jam without comment. I didn't eat the pancakes, but I spread the jam on them to be polite. Linda told a story about her nephew who'd gotten lost in an airport once and ended up on a flight to Denver instead of Detroit. Joe asked if I was stationed nearby. I said, "A few hours out." They didn't ask what I did. They didn't ask if I was married. They didn't ask why I was there alone. They just talked, slowly, about real things and ordinary things. The kind of conversation that doesn't require performance. I drank the coffee, not because I wanted it, but because it was warm and I needed something in my hands. An hour passed, maybe more. The diner grew quieter. 2 teenage boys left with bags of takeout. A man in a coat stained with road salt sat at the counter, stirring cream into his cup. Joe stood first. "We should head home," he said. "Storm's coming in." Linda looked at me. "You have plans tomorrow?" I hesitated. She waited. "No," I said. "Well," she replied, rising and gathering her coat, "we're doing dinner. Nothing fancy. Just the 4 of us." I looked at her, confused. "Us too," she clarified. "And you. That makes 3. But we always set a 4th place. Just in case." Joe opened the door. The wind rushed in and lifted the corner of the doormat. "Come if you want," Linda said. "We won't fuss, or we will, but we won't mind if you don't." They left without waiting for an answer. The waitress brought the check. Someone had already paid it. I sat there a few minutes longer. Then I folded the napkin, tucked it under the plate, and left. In the pocket of my coat, my phone buzzed. One new message. A photo of Samantha's living room. Tree, stockings, people smiling in front of a fire. No caption, no voice. I stood on the sidewalk, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I deleted it. I looked up. The city lights flickered against the clouds. Somewhere above me, planes were circling. I walked slowly back to the hotel. The next morning, I went to Linda and Joe's. Their house sat on a quiet street, the kind that only appeared in winter. All hedges, porches, wreaths hung with twine. The sidewalk hadn't been shoveled yet, but someone had scattered salt. I walked carefully, boots pressing clear prints into the crusted snow. Linda opened the door before I knocked. "We don't stand on ceremony," she said, stepping back. "Come in." Joe appeared behind her, holding a dish towel. He nodded once, eyes kind. "You made it." The house smelled like garlic and pine. A real tree stood in the corner of the living room, strung with mismatched ornaments and wide cloth ribbon. It leaned slightly to the left. "Coffee?" Linda asked. "Yes, please." She handed me a mug. Not a holiday one, just ceramic, pale green, slightly chipped near the rim. It was warm, heavy in the hand. They didn't ask questions. Not then. Linda pointed to the hallway. "Bathroom's there. Coats go on the bench." I hung mine neatly, sat on the edge of the bench, and took my boots off without being asked. The floors were polished wood, worn smooth in the center like they'd been walked the same way for decades. Their kitchen was small but full. A ham rested on the counter beside a stack of foil pans. There was no centerpiece, no chargers, no linen napkins folded into shapes, just bowls, lids, trays, the quiet confidence of people who cook with purpose. Joe stirred something in a pot. Linda opened the oven and checked rolls. She didn't offer to teach or explain. She just handed me a spoon and pointed toward a bowl. "Stir until it smells like it should," she said. "You'll know." There were no instructions beyond that. We moved around each other like people who'd done this before. I reached for the right drawer on the first try. Linda passed me a towel without looking. Joe flipped the ham and caught the juice before it spilled. Somewhere around noon, the snow started again. Joe turned on the radio. Low jazz, almost too faint to hear. "Still clear on the roads?" he asked. Linda peered out the window. "They'll salt again before sundown." The front door opened without warning. "That'll be Ben," Joe said. A man stepped inside, cheeks red from wind. He shook snow from his jacket and leaned down to unlace his boots. "Hey, Ma. Hey, Pops." He was younger than me. Broad shoulders, clean shave, steady gait. He spotted me immediately, and his smile didn't change. "You must be the captain," he said. "Not anymore." He held out a hand. Ben Miller. Claire Robinson. His grip was warm, firm. He didn't ask why I was there. We ate at 2:00. No speeches, just plates passed hand to hand, chairs pulled close, laughter in short, gentle bursts. No one said grace, but everyone paused for a moment before starting. Afterward, Ben offered to wash. I dried. Linda packed leftovers into mismatched containers, labeling them with masking tape and a black marker. Joe slipped a Tupperware of ham into my coat pocket when he thought no one was looking. Ben caught it and grinned. "He does that to all the new strays." I said nothing, just zipped the coat. When I left, Linda handed me a grocery bag with 2 more containers and a small wrapped parcel. "Just something we didn't get around to mailing," she said. "Thank you." Joe reached for my shoulder. "Next Sunday," he said. "Come by. We grill year-round. Just dress warm." "I will." Ben opened the door for me, then paused. "Need a ride back?" "No, I'm close." He nodded. "See you next time, then." I walked back through the quiet street. The snow had begun to pile against the base of the mailboxes. A dog barked once, then fell silent. The hotel room felt smaller than before. I set the containers in the fridge, unwrapped the small package. It was a pair of socks, thick, woolen, hand-knit, gray with a navy stripe at the cuff. There was no note. I put them on and sat by the window, watching the storm settle. The next Sunday, I returned. So did the next. Each time, it was the same. Warmth, food, laughter that never asked too much. I brought things sometimes. A pie, a bottle of wine, once a toolkit I found on sale. Joe kept it under the sink. By spring, they had given me a key. "For the back door," Linda said. "The front sticks in summer." I didn't use it much, but I kept it on my ring. One night in May, we were on the patio. Joe was grilling. Linda brought out lemonade. Ben sat beside me on the steps, tossing bottle caps into a jar. "You're quieter than usual," he said. I shrugged. "Just thinking." "Something good?" "I'm not sure yet." He didn't press. We sat like that for a while, the kind of silence that doesn't demand anything. I watched the smoke drift upward, caught in the branches above. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I opened the drawer where I kept small things I didn't know what to do with. Photos, receipts, old letters. There was an envelope I hadn't touched in years. Heavy paper, thick seal, my father's handwriting. He had handed it to me 5 days before the call. "You'll know when to use it," he'd said. That was all. I slid my finger under the seal and opened it. Inside, a bank card, one of those reloadable ones, a note. $1,000, if you need a start. The date was 3 days before Linda's call. I set the envelope on the desk and stared at it for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, logged into the bank website. The account was still active, and the balance wasn't $1,000. It was $2,417,893. There was a tab labeled Trust Documents. I clicked it. The name on the file, Robinson Family Trust. Beneficiary Claire E. Robinson. Created 2009. Modified 2015. Finalized 2018. I scrolled. Clause after clause. Legal language, investment breakdowns, custodial transitions. Then I found it. Sole heir designation, Claire Elise Robinson, granddaughter of Edwin Charles Robinson. Grandfather, not father. It was signed, witnessed, notarized, and nowhere did it mention Samantha, or my mother, or anyone else. I didn't move, just let the silence settle. My grandfather had left it to me, all of it. and no one ever told me. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not Linda, not Joe, not Ben. I copied the documents to a flash drive and printed the summary pages, balances, dates, signatories. I read them twice, then once more with a pen in hand, underlining anything that felt like a thread someone might pull. Then I put everything in a folder and locked it in the desk drawer. The next day, I drove to the bank, not the branch listed on the account, but a smaller location near the edge of town, the kind with dusty blinds and wood paneling that hadn't been updated since the early 90s. I waited 15 minutes before someone called my name, a woman in her 60s, tired eyes, wedding ring worn thin with time. She looked at the card, typed for a long time, then paused. "I'll be right back," she said. She came back with a man in a navy suit and a different voice, one with training in it. "Miss Robinson?" "Yes. I'm Kevin Stratton." "Would you mind stepping into the office?" The office was small. File cabinets, a framed certificate from a regional leadership summit, a photo of a boat with the caption, "Someday." He closed the door gently, sat down across from me. "I understand you're here about an account connected to the Robinson Family Trust?" "Yes." He adjusted his tie. "Can you tell me how you obtained access?" I handed him the printed summary. It was left to me. "I have the original documents." He scanned the page. His eyes stopped halfway through. "I'll need to confirm this with our records," he said. "But if this matches what I think it does, this is significant." "I understand." "Do you have identification?" I passed over my military ID. His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he said nothing. He excused himself, took the papers with him. 15 minutes passed. I counted ceiling tiles, 12 across, 8 deep, one cracked in the corner like a spider web. He returned with a different folder. "Miss Robinson," he said, voice slower now. "I've reviewed the documents. You are indeed the sole beneficiary. This account has been held under internal watch since your grandfather's passing." I nodded. There were instructions to wait until a claimant presented the original credentials. No outreach was made, per the terms of the trust. It was specific. I figured. "You have full authority to transfer, withdraw, or restructure as of now. Would you like assistance setting up access?" "No," I said. "Not yet. I just wanted to know it was real." He studied me for a moment, then stood. "If you need anything, my direct line is on the card." I left the bank and didn't speak for the rest of the day. Back at the apartment, I sat on the floor with the folder spread across my knees, pages slightly curled from the cold. I laid out the numbers beside the photos I hadn't put up, a few from Basic, one with my first team, a grainy one of me and my grandfather on the porch in North Carolina. I remembered him handing me envelopes when I left for each deployment. $50, a card with one sentence, "Come home straight." Never a phone call, never a voicemail, just that. The last time I saw him, he hugged me once, then looked me in the eye and said, "When the time comes, act like you've always known." Now I did. The following Sunday, I brought a pie. Joe opened the back door before I knocked. "She brought Cherry," he said. "We're keeping her." Ben was in the garage tightening something under the hood of an old truck. He stood when I walked in, wiped his hands on a towel, and nodded toward the house. "Game's on. Joe's already pretending it matters." I sat at the edge of the workbench and watched him finish what he was doing. No one asked where I'd been. Later, while Linda sliced the pie, I asked if I could borrow their printer. "Of course," she said, not looking up. "Ink's low, just shake the cartridge." In the spare bedroom, I printed copies of the trust document, one to keep, one to send, one to hold. I sealed the second copy in a flat envelope and addressed it to an attorney I hadn't called in 3 years, a military contact, quiet, thorough, expensive. The third copy I put in the glove compartment of my car, not for safekeeping, for visibility. I wanted to know it was always close. 3 weeks passed, snow melted, then refroze, then melted again. In early February, I received a packet in the mail. Stamped, certified, return address from a firm downtown. My attorney. Inside, a memo. Legal standing verified. Trust intact. Inheritance not subject to contest. Family has no claim. The rest was technical. Backup storage recommendations. Investment options. I filed it neatly, then set it aside. That night, Joe grilled steaks. Ben brought over a six-pack. Linda made potatoes the way she always did, with too much butter and not enough apology. They didn't know yet. I hadn't told them. After dinner, I cleared the table. Linda dried. Ben refilled the ice tray. Joe sorted through the mail. I stepped outside, stood by the side of the house. Cold air, clear sky. A plane moved overhead, blinking slowly. Ben joined me a few minutes later. He didn't ask, just handed me a glass and leaned against the siding. "You're quiet again," he said. "I found something." "Yeah?" "A trust. From my grandfather. He left it to me." Ben sipped, nodded once. "That why you've been driving into the city?" "Yes." "You tell your folks?" "No." "Going to?" "Eventually." He didn't respond. We stood in silence until Linda called us in for pie. It happened in March. A message from my mother. "Your father thinks it's time to talk." Samantha agrees. I didn't reply. 3 days later, I received an email from a financial institution I hadn't used in over a decade. Request to update account access. Request to change beneficiary. The name listed as requester, Robinson J. Not grandfather, father. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to the attorney. He replied in under an hour. "Already blocked. Legal warning sent. Any further attempts will be treated as fraud. You're covered." I sat at the kitchen table in Linda's house, the email open on my screen. Joe looked up from his crossword. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Everything's exactly as it should be." That Sunday, I made an announcement. We were sitting on the patio again. First warm day in weeks. "I changed my name," I said. Linda raised her eyebrows. Joe lowered his coffee. Ben didn't move. "I filed the paperwork last week. It's legal now. Claire Elise Miller." Joe blinked. "Well, hell." Linda smiled, not wide, just once. Ben raised his glass. "Miller's a solid name." "No argument," I said. We didn't toast. We didn't hug. But something shifted. A week later, I received a certified letter from my father's lawyer. It asked for a meeting. Not formal, just family. I declined. Politely, firmly. I kept a copy of the letter. Not out of fear, out of habit. Control isn't about confrontation. It's about knowing who owns the room. I didn't need their table. I had my own. The wedding was small, 42 guests, no seating chart. We held it on the coast where the air was salt thick and the wind moved through everything like it had a purpose. The venue was a refurbished cannery, whitewashed walls and dark beams, perched just above the inlet. Windows faced the water. No pews, just chairs in rows, quietly waiting. Linda wore deep navy. Joe wore the same tie he'd worn to his daughter's wedding 15 years earlier. "I'm getting my money's worth," he said. Ben smiled and adjusted the knot. I arrived through the side door, alone. My dress was plain, ivory silk, high neckline, sleeves to the wrist. No sequins, no lace. I'd chosen it that way on purpose. Nothing to prove, nothing to distract. The officiant was a former chaplain. He didn't believe in filler words. He kept the ceremony under 10 minutes. I said my vows quietly. Ben said his, like he meant every word. When the MC took the microphone for introductions, his voice was smooth, but not performative. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "please welcome the newlyweds, Claire and Ben Miller." Then he paused, a fraction longer than expected. "And now," he added, "we'll begin the first dance. But before we do, let's take a moment to thank the parents of the bride, Joe and Linda Miller." There was silence, then a short burst of polite applause. I glanced toward the back of the room. My biological parents stood near the exit, stunned. Samantha was beside them, expression unreadable. My mother's mouth opened slightly like she might speak. My father's arms were crossed, jaw set. They weren't supposed to be there. I hadn't invited them. But someone had forwarded the notice. A cousin, maybe. It didn't matter. They didn't move, just stood and watched. I walked toward them slowly, careful not to trip on the hem of my dress. Linda reached out slightly, then let her hand fall. Joe said nothing. When I reached them, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't ask questions. "You didn't lose me," I said. "You just chose not to keep me." And they did. I turned and walked away. Ben met me halfway, his hand steady on my back. The photographer clicked once, then stopped. We danced once. No choreography, no spotlight, just a slow rhythm and quiet voices layered behind it. Afterward, we sat on the low deck outside while guests drank coffee and swapped stories. Linda brought me a blanket. Joe handed Ben a small flask with no label. I watched the sky turn to stone-colored dusk, listened to the gulls settle. No one mentioned the people who left early. No one needed to. We didn't take a honeymoon. Ben had shifts scheduled, and I had paperwork. There was still a lease to finish, mail to forward, base accounts to close. We moved into the Millers' guest house at first, a small structure behind their main house, originally meant for Linda's mother. 2 rooms, wide windows, built-in shelves, enough space to breathe. I kept my uniforms in the same trunk I'd used for deployments, folded them with the same hands, but slower now. One night, I took the nameplate from my last set of ACUs and placed it on the bookshelf. C. Robinson in black letters. Nothing else. I didn't tell Ben. I just left it there. He saw it the next morning. Didn't say a word. Just moved his spare keys to the shelf below. In April, I went back to the bank. Not the small branch, the downtown office. 10 stories up. Glass conference rooms, carpets too soft to hear your own footsteps. I met with the trust manager, reviewed the accounts again. Nothing had changed, but I had. "I'd like to establish a fund," I said. "Of course," he replied. "For what purpose?" "Discretionary support. Single use. No ongoing programs, no names attached." He nodded. "Anonymous?" "Yes." We set it up in 2 meetings. I funded it in 1 transfer. I wrote the mission statement myself. Emergency resources for service members rejected by their families. Nothing more. I didn't promote it. I didn't tell anyone. But 3 months later, I received a letter. No return address, just an airpost sticker. Inside, a handwritten note. They told me I'd always have somewhere to go. Thank you. I folded it once, slid it into a drawer beside the trust documents, and closed it. That summer, Linda asked if we wanted the house. We were standing in the garden, her fingers stained with soil, a tray of seedlings balanced on her hip. "You and Ben should live here," she said. "We're thinking of downsizing. That place in the valley is still on the market. Smaller, easier." I didn't answer right away. She bent down, eased a stem into the dirt, patted it carefully. No pressure, just a thought. I watched her work, the quiet confidence in her hands, the absence of drama. Later that evening, Ben and I walked the perimeter of the property, porch light off, grass still warm from the sun. "If they move," he said, "we should keep it the way it is." I nodded. "We will." The name change reached the Department of Defense database in August. New ID, new logins, new forms. I checked the entry one final time. Miller, Clara Lease, no aliases, no other records. A clean line. After I submitted the last form, I logged out, shut the laptop, and took a walk through the neighborhood. Fences needed painting. A tire swing creaked in the wind. Somewhere a dog barked 3 times, then stopped. I walked past the old grocery store, past the post office, past the hardware store where Joe still bought his nails 1 box at a time. When I got home, Ben was making coffee. "How's it feel?" he asked. "Final." He handed me a mug. "No sugar, just the way I liked it." "I thought about getting a new ID, too," he said, almost teasing. "You'd have to marry into it," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Too late," I added. He smiled. Guess I'm stuck. We stood in the kitchen, the way people do when everything is done and nothing needs to be said. The mug was warm in my hand. Outside, wind moved through the trees with enough force to remind us we weren't in control of anything but our own timing. That was enough. The letter came in early September. Thick paper, raised lettering, return address, Robinson and Fox, LLP. I knew the name. My grandfather's old firm, the one he'd left before he retired. I opened it slowly. Inside, Claire, we're writing to inform you that your mother, Cynthia Robinson, has initiated proceedings to challenge the structure and distribution of the Edwin C. Robinson Trust. Our office has advised her that the statute of limitations has expired. However, she has requested a mediated review. Please let us know if you wish to respond. Respectfully, Edward Fox, Esquire. I folded the letter and placed it into a manila file labeled Attempts. There were 6 others in the folder, one from Samantha's lawyer, one from a cousin asking if the family could open dialogue, a message from my father's accountant that had arrived months ago and never received a reply. Ben walked in while I was filing it. Another one? Yes. He glanced at the envelope, then at me. Anything we need to worry about? No. He nodded and disappeared into the hallway. The conversation ended there. I emailed Fox's office the next morning. No response, no interest in mediation. Please inform all parties that my name is Claire Elise Miller, legal heir and sole beneficiary. Future contact regarding this trust will be redirected to counsel. I hit send, then logged out. That afternoon, I took down the last framed photo in the hallway. It was a picture of my commissioning ceremony, the only one my parents had attended. In it, I'm in dress blues, shoulders straight, smile tight. My mother is off to the side, holding a clutch like it might break open. My father stands slightly behind me, hand not quite touching my back. The only visible emotion is discomfort. I wrapped the frame in brown paper, marked the back, returned to sender, and boxed it up. Ben passed me the tape without comment. Joe and Linda moved out in October. The small house in the valley had a fireplace and a wraparound porch. Linda said the light there was different, softer somehow. We kept the big house. I didn't change the furniture. I didn't repaint. I didn't renovate the kitchen. I left the wind chimes by the back door and the deep dent in the pantry where someone had bumped it years ago with a serving tray. Some histories are worth keeping. Others don't need explaining. We planted a new tree in the front yard, something tall and narrow that would hold its shape in wind. Ben dug the hole. I steadied the trunk. Neither of us spoke. In November, Samantha sent a letter, handwritten, no envelope, just a folded sheet slipped into a holiday card. It arrived without a return address. Claire, we didn't know. That's what Mom keeps saying. We didn't know about the trust. We didn't know how serious it all was. I'm not sure I believe her anymore, but I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much. If you ever want to talk, I'd like that. I read it once, then again. I didn't write back. Some people confuse guilt with apology. One is reflex, the other is change. The letter went into the same file as the others. Thanksgiving came early that year. The sky was heavy. Ben's sister flew in with her wife and their daughter. Joe brought pie. Linda made her stuffing with too much sage and told the story about the blender again. We all laughed in the right places. After dinner, I took a walk alone. The street was quiet, leaves stacked in corners like old paper. One house still had a pumpkin on the porch. Someone had carved it to look surprised. The air smelled like wood smoke and wet bark. Halfway down the block, I passed a house with all its lights on. Inside, through the large front window, I saw a family sitting around a table. They weren't talking, just eating, slowly, carefully. I kept walking. Back at home, Ben had started a fire. He handed me a blanket without saying anything. I curled up on the couch, feet tucked beneath me, warmth rising from the floorboards. Joe was asleep in the recliner. Linda whispered over dishes in the kitchen. The child was playing with a puzzle. The room was full without being loud. Ben sat beside me, his hand resting gently on my knee. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and I was. A week before Christmas, I received a call from a woman named Ellen Mack. She introduced herself as an estate officer from the Department of Defense. "We're doing a standard review," she said, "for service members with long-term trusts. Is now a good time?" "Yes." She asked questions, dates, records, a few confirmations about deployments, then a pause. "I'm seeing here," she said, "that the original trust included a contingent clause. Did you know that?" "No." She read from the screen. "In the event that the named beneficiary is estranged from her biological family due to conduct detrimental to her well-being, this trust shall also function as an instrument of transfer, revoking any prior estate claims from secondary relatives." I waited. "This clause was added in 2015, she said. "That's unusual. Very specific language." I closed my eyes briefly. "My grandfather was careful." She hesitated. "We don't see that kind of clause unless something serious happened." It did. There was another pause. "Well," she said finally, "your records are clean. Everything is in order. Just needed to confirm." "Thank you." She cleared her throat. "Also, just personally, thank you for your service. I don't usually get to say that to someone with your file." "You're welcome." She hung up. I sat there a long time, the room dark except for the low light above the stove. It wasn't relief I felt. It was something quieter. Certainty. On Christmas Eve, we hosted dinner. Joe carved the ham. Linda made her usual pie. Ben poured cider into mismatched mugs. After the meal, everyone drifted toward the living room. Pillows were tossed on the floor. The fire snapped. Someone put on music too low to hear the lyrics. I stepped outside with a plate of cookies, wrapped in foil. The wind had shifted, a cold front moving in. The stars were sharp overhead. I walked to the porch swing and sat down, the cookies balanced on my lap. After a minute, I stood, walked down to the sidewalk and crossed the street. There was a neighbor, elderly, lived alone. No lights on, but I knew she was home. I left the cookies at her door. When I turned back, I saw the tree glowing faintly through our window. Ben was standing just inside, watching. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. I never called my parents again, never blocked their numbers either, never changed my address, never disappeared. I just made it known, gently, firmly, permanently, that I wasn't returning. They weren't exiled. They were released from expectation, from proximity, from the false comfort of re-entry. They had chosen not to keep me, and I had chosen not to stay. If you've read this far, thank you. If something in it felt familiar, you're not alone. Families don't always break loudly. Sometimes they just stop returning your name in full. Sometimes they offer invitations with expiration dates. Sometimes you walk away not because you're angry, but because peace finally feels heavier in your hand than history. I'd like to hear your story too, if you're ready. And if you'd like to stay connected, you can. Quietly, no pressure. Some of us build new homes, not to prove anything, just to rest. You're welcome here.